We are so excited to be back for the third installment of our spring rose gardening workshop or series, whatever you want to call it. I'm Katie Rose Watson, creator of The Rose Table, which is a food and gardening lifestyle website. And I am joined by legendary rose gardener, Paul Zimmerman. Paul, always a pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Katie Rose. Nice to be with you again. Spring is springing in the upstate of South Carolina, and guys, it's hard to believe this is number three. I feel like we could do like 7 or 8 of these things. There's been so much that we've been
I
covering, and
know.
and our and
I
our
know.
guests and our guests have been fabulous with questions. So which is always a lot of fun because you never know what's coming.
Yes. So if you are tuning in today, please drop your questions in the comments. Anything that you want to know about growing roses, please ask us in the comments, and we will answer as many questions as we can. We're
Yes,
also
we
going to
will.
give away 3 roses from Jackson and Perkins, one of our favorite rose purveyors. So I'm very excited about that. You can enter to win using the link. You just have to register to win a free rose. Who doesn't love it? And we are going to announce the winners at the end of this live. Pretty exciting. So, Paul, first of all,
Yeah.
what's happening in your garden? Is stuff blooming, leafing out? What's going on?
Yeah, it's been interesting because I was fairly dormant, and then all of a sudden, this last 4 or 5 days, and I started my pruning because the forsythia was blooming, thinking, okay, I've got a little bit of time, and all of a sudden, it's like, boom! I've just got leaves everywhere, and it surprised
Yes.
me. And one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit is that people say, "Oh my gosh, I've got a lot of leaves. Is it okay to keep pruning?" And the answer is yes, you can keep pruning. Don't worry about that. Maybe you prune a little bit less. I might do that a little bit, but even though you have some foliage, it's okay to prune. And as always, make sure get the dead growth out, get the weak growth out. But even with the leaves, it's okay to prune. You'll be absolutely fine.
I'm happy to hear that because I have never been this late on pruning ever. Every week we do this live and I say, okay, this is the week I'm going to finish my pruning. And
Yeah.
then I don't. But if the wind ever dies down here, then I got to go out and do that. And anybody watching, if you want full pruning tips, we did a whole workshop about pruning last week. So after this live, be sure and go watch that one.
Yep.
Anything new in your garden this year?
No, not really. I mean, I've got, perennials are coming up. I've got some perennials I added over the last couple of years that are now going to be a little bit more mature. I'm excited about that. Excited about that. Gardening mistake, confession. I planted Physostasia, known as the obedient plant, about 2 or 3 years ago. I was told it was not the invasive type, and they were wrong.
Oh, no.
It is spread into the lawn. This thing is running rampant. So yeah,
no.
I mean, it's a lovely plant. So I've got to get a shovel to dig it out. And so full confession to gardening mistake. I was hoping it wasn't going to be the ramp. So if anybody, by the way, wants Physostasia, I'm your guy.
Oh, so Wanda says, "Does Paul Zimmerman ever age?"
No, I was born old, Wanda. I was just born old.
So
I could actually buy beer when I was 3.
Well, I am very excited. I have spring is definitely springing in my garden, but I do have several new things on the way from Jackson and Perkins. I just ordered Moon Dance, which is a beautiful white rose. Supposed to be really an easy keeper, which I love. I always tell people it's very Game of Thrones in my garden. You either survive or you're out. I don't like overly fussy plants, which is why I like roses because I think they're, quite hardy. And then I have Dream Come True coming, which is a beautiful kind of like, what would we say, yellow coral bleeding rose with huge, huge blooms. I actually grew this one at my first house and I just miss it too much. It's been almost 10 years without my beloved Dream Come True. I know. And there's just so many ones that I've wanted to try. I mean, you know how it is. And I thought, okay, I need to try all these new roses at my new house, but I just miss Dream Come True so much. So have that one coming in. And then Always and Forever, because I don't have a lot of red roses. And I thought that would be a good one. Have you ever grown that one?
I've not grown that one. No, I've got one called Never Been Redder from Jackson Perkins, which I really like. Yeah, really nice. It's a kind of a ruffled, roundish root petal thing. It's got a really nice habitat to it. Very disease resistant. Again, I'm a no spray garden in the upstate of South Carolina. So Never Been Redder is a red that I really, really like. And I've got, we were talking before we came on about, new roses coming in. A lot of what I have coming in are stuff that roses that haven't been released yet because I'm testing or looking at them and things like that. And so, but I
So
do
cool.
have some roses that we've just released, and I'm really pleased with this. We have at Jackson Perkins, it's called the Around the World Collection. And if you go to Jackson Perkins website, you click on roses in the top menu, and then under Jackson Perkins Library of Roses, click on the Around the World logo. And there's a new to America, old to me rose in that collection called Oxford Girl. And Oxford Girl is a climbing rose bred by Mike Athey of New Zealand. I was introduced to this rose back in about 2005 when I had my nursery Ashdown Roses, and I brought it in through Europe because we're not allowed to import from New Zealand. Outstanding pink climber. I had it in the Biltmore International Rose Trials, almost won. Pink climbing rose, very nice bloom, very fragrant, incredibly fragrant. Probably one of the most disease-resistant roses in my garden. Even in August, I rarely see disease on this thing. So fragrance, disease-resistant. Oxford Girl, a great rose. A couple of John Ford roses also in that collection. Hummingbird, which is sold out. But Mysterious and Big Ben also have been in my garden now for 4 or 5 years. And I've had a chance to observe them and get to know them. So while those are new roses that are in my garden, but they're wonderful, wonderful roses in that Around the World collection. Some great roses in there that are coming out.
So exciting. And before we hopped on here, we did check, you guys, and Oxford Girl is still available if you do want that one from Jackson & Perkins, but they do go fast. I mean, they sell out like crazy of these roses. So definitely.
Yeah, it's a Mannerly climber too. It's like 10 foot, 11 foot. It's not going to take over. I've got it on a pergola. If you've ever watched my videos, I stand in front of a pergola in front of what's my workshop, my woodworking shop. It's called the Shack is what we call it here on the farm. You'll see a pink rose with larger flowers. That's Oxford Girl. It's been there for, it's been there for probably 25 years.
Ah, very nice. And still going strong. Oh, and guys, if you want to place an order, I do have a promo code for you, and it's RoseTable15 for 15% off your order if you have not ordered yet from Jackson & Perkins. And Paul, I have to tell you, I actually just ordered Forsythia because of our live the last 2 weeks where you were talking about Forsythia. So it's
good. One down, only a few million more to go.
yeah, exactly. But we love the rose companions too.
Yeah, Forsythia we talked about with pruning. People ask me when's the right time to prune, and I say when the Forsythia blooms, if you have Forsythia in your part of the world. And part of that is because I don't like to garden by a calendar necessarily. I don't like to sit there and say, well, it's March 1st, I must be doing this. I like to let nature tell me when it's time. Yeah, every year is different. It really is. This year we're going to be early, I think. That's my opinion.
So spring is a crucial time for rose care, of course. So let's talk a little bit about what are the most important steps gardeners should take to set their roses up for success.
Yeah, so spring is an important time because you really are setting up for the rest of the year. We started with pruning. We talked about that last week. Again, quick review, prune to the height you feel you want to get to, dead wood, twiggy growth, all very, very, very important. Check your mulch levels. Make sure your mulch is you got a decent layer of mulch on there. You don't want to overdo it. We were asked last week, should you mulch up to the stem of the plant? No, mulch a little bit away from it so you don't, suffocate the plant. That's what too much mulch can do. So check that out. Check your pH levels in your soil. That's real important. Too high, too low. It locks up the nutrients. They can't get into the rose itself. And then I think the thing to start talking about, Katie Rose, is a fertilizing program. And I think we could kind of break it into existing plants and new plants because it's kind of going to treat them a little bit differently.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk a little bit first because I think it's a faster conversation. Brand new plants, should people fertilize at all this year?
So I believe in minimal fertilizer for new plants because what you really want to do is let the plants settle into your garden and get established. That's the most important thing. We also talk about this first, roots first, tops second, which means you want to grow the roots first and the tops second. So when you buy fertilizer, it has 3 numbers. It's called the NPK scale. The first one is nitrogen. Nitrogen is top growth above the ground. You want to feed with very little nitrogen if possible. I always recommend for new roses an organic, rose food of some kind. Espoma rose tone, which we sell on Jackson Perkins website. Organic, not a lot of nitrogen, not a lot of nutrients, just kind of gives it just a little bit of a boost is what it does. A seaweed-based fertilizer like Sea Magic, another great product that you can use liquid. It's just going to build up the plant's immune system and help build the plant, those roots grow. So focus on the roots growth first on your established roses.
I want to hype Sea Magic a little bit more because everybody knows this is like my favorite
Yeah.
fertilizer to use, because not only do I use it on my roses every like 3-4 weeks, but I also use it on my tomato plants, and it's just the best
Yeah.
tomatoes you've ever tasted are the Sea Magic
Oh yeah,
tomatoes.
they are. Yeah,
They
and that's a
feel
very
so
important point
sweet.
that you just made, because things like Sea Magic can be used on all your plants, vegetables, perennials. So don't feel like you have to only get the roses. When I use something like Sea Magic, I use a hose end sprayer, and I literally just wash the entire garden with it. All the It's a foliar feed. Yeah, great product.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, and easy to use too. You basically
yeah,
like dilute it in water, have a jug, and then you use I think half a cup per like watering can. So super, super
yeah.
easy. And
Very
if you're
easy to go. Yeah.
intimidated about fertilizer, to me it's like one of the easiest ones to use.
I agree. Yeah,
Uh,
and fertilizer sometimes is made way too complicated. And you make a good point. If it's easy to
yeah,
use, you'll use it. If it's complicated,
yeah.
it sits in the shed.
Right, exactly. And yeah, I do think people get a little bit intimidated. So it's such a good place to start. Um, What about established roses? What can you talk to us about your like favorite feed plan for, say, a rose that's like 5 years old, one of your established roses?
Yeah, so once the rose gets 2 or 3 years in the ground, you've got nice top growth. It's blooming. It's settling in. You got good canes and stuff along those lines. So again, fertilizing is a bit like we talked about pruning. What's your objective? Okay. So if you're in a rose exhibitor, for example, and you're looking for the long stem hybrid tea, you want to enter into a show, you're going to fertilize a lot more intensely. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's your goal. But let's talk about general gardeners, which I think is what our listening audience basically is. You want a good garden rose. You want lots of flowers. You also don't want to be out there every single weekend being a slave to this process. So here's my very basic, simple fertilizing program. All right. When the first true sets of leaves appear on your roses, which for me is like right now, I really believe a time release fertilizer. We sell Kaboom, for example, which is a time release fertilizer that feeds your roses slowly over a 4 to 5 month period with nutrients, gets it nice and balanced. You don't get fertilizer dump. It also means you're not out there doing it all the time. That's a granular fertilizer. Then something
I
like
love
Sea Magic,
Jackson
about
and
every,
Perkins
sorry, go ahead.
Dynamite. I was just to say I
Dynamite.
love Jackson and Perkins Dynamite.
It's
If we could
dynamite.
drop
That's
a
what it
link
is.
in the
Yeah. I
chat
don't know why
too,
Kaboom.
that'd
Well,
be
Kaboom,
perfect.
dynamite, and the noise Kaboom, which it makes after you apply it.
Yes.
Fast recovery. Yes, which is a great fertilizer. Thank you for that. And then Sea Magic about every 3 to 4 weeks on top of that. And you can do the dynamite and the sea Magic and start them both at the same time. That's okay. So do that. And then basically then by middle of summer, which you talk about August or for me or something like that, when you're setting them up for the fall bloom, you don't want to use the time release fertilizer again, because you don't want to be fertilizing into the fall. You can use something like Espoma Rose Tone, just to give them a little boost to get them into that fall blooming. So when the leaves appear, time release fertilizer, start your Sea Magic, your seaweed based fertilizer. In late summer, going in the fall, something like Espoma Rose Tone, continue your Sea Magic, and then stop fertilizing about 6 to 8 weeks before your first frost date to let your roses start to go dormant. That's a very simple, basic, non-laborious feeding program for established roses. I've used it for
And really
decades.
just 3 products. And I know this because
Yes.
I've been following your feed program for years and years and years. So I have
Yeah.
this memorized. Yes. Susan
Testimonials.
wants to know, are you supposed to fertilize every 3 to 4 weeks also in the summer?
So, Susan, that's what we talked about with the time release. That's why I like it so much, because it's not so much you have to overdo it and overdo it and overdo it. And some fertilizers, if the temperatures start to rise, what they do, they call dump, which is put out too much of of one of the NPK all at once. So do your time release. That's going to get you literally from now, if your roses are leafing out like I am, that'll get me through August. But the liquid fertilizer, like the Sea Magic, yes, every 3 to 4 weeks, just keep applying that on a regular basis, even through the summer. It really does help the roses deal with stress.
And how can people tell if they are over fertilizing or under fertilizing?
The roses die. Sorry, couldn't resist.
But really, I think you would have to really over fertilize something, or if not,
Yeah.
like check your soil levels.
Yeah, I mean, if you're seeing, if the rose has stopped growing, if it's suffering, even if the leaves are falling off, the yellowing, it's probably overstressed and overnutrient. Under fertilizing is actually hard to do in terms of it won't really harm the plant. But if the plant's not producing a lot of new growth, the blooms are slowing down, the blooms are a little bit smaller, then it's probably going to be easier to do. then you might be under fertilizing a bit. But that's also why I like that time release program. It takes the guesswork out of it. You know, those fertilizers are designed to release the nutrients over a period of 4 to 5 months on a consistent, steady, slow basis as the plants need it, not necessarily overdoing it. And something like Sea Magic or seaweed based, it's very, very hard to overdo something like that.
And I think too, this is going to sound so silly, but read the package instructions. Don't just throw it on there. When in doubt, read the package, because most of them are very, very simple. And it says, you know, add a capful to the base of the plant, or add half a cup to your watering can, and do that. Follow instructions. When in doubt, don't try to go rogue.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you particularly with a granular fertilizer, not a time release, I'm talking about regular granular. And probably even a non-organic granular like a 10-10-10, for example. If you put it down and the foliage gets scorched and brown, that means you've overdone it. That's a good sign of over-fertilizing.
So we talked about timing a little bit. What about organic versus synthetic fertilizers? Do you have any thoughts on this, pros and cons for spring rose, Karen?
Yeah, I've got a fairly strong opinion, but it's going to be a personal one. This is just my opinion. Everybody who knows me knows I'm an organic rose grower. I'm an organic gardener. You know, my wife purchased the farm that we live on 30 years ago. We've never used chemicals on this farm. So I believe in making sure your soil is healthy. That's the number one thing of the whole thing, because without that, any kind of fertilizer is going to get locked up and not be able to do anything. I like organics for the reasons we've just been talking about. They tend to release slower and just more gradual. They also help feed the soil. Now, the chemicals, you know, like like a Miracle-Gro, which is a good product. I'm not saying it's not. It's a very good product. If you have like a wedding coming up or a party coming up or something, an event coming in your garden, you want to give them like a little boost, you know, that's not a bad idea to use that. But I prefer organics. It's slower over time. They also help feed the soil, and it's much harder to make a mistake by overfeeding like we just talked about.
And while we're talking about soil, do you have a favorite, like if somebody didn't want a complicated, you know, build your own situation, do you have a favorite sort of brand that you go to for sort of a one-stop shop soil, or do you always mix your own?
Well, it depends. I mean, if I'm using soil in containers, I'll just go get a good high-end potting soil. You know, I won't go buy something cheap. You know, go to your garden center, get something really high-end for that. Now, for soil in the ground, I actually don't believe in adding any kind of potting soil to the ground. You're better off working with your native soil and amending it. And soil becomes, first of all, the number one thing you do, get a soil test. The very, very, very first thing you want to do. Because the soil test is going to analyze your soil. And you can get this at agricultural extension offices. A lot of universities will do soil tests. It's not expensive. You know, I always say getting a soil test it'd be like going to the doctor and saying, you know, I don't feel well. And the doctor says, well, here, just try this and come back. And if it doesn't work, we'll go from there. No, the doctor's going to examine you first. And that's what the soil test is all about. Get a soil test. That's going to tell you what you need to do. Probably add organic nutrients. Is your phosphorus too high? Is your calcium too high? If it is, don't add bone meal. So get that soil test first, and then basically use that as a roadmap to go from there. That's really the whole key to the whole thing. Without healthy soil, you will never have a healthy garden.
Really good advice. Cherie says, I love and have used the Dynamite, but it needs to be sold in a larger container or bag. Please, J&P. We feel ya, Cherie.
We do. Yeah, I get you. Yeah, when you've got, you know, if you have a handful of roses, but I've got like 250, 300, and I need like, you know, I need like a couple hundred pounds of fertilizer when I go out there. I buy fertilizer in my pickup truck. Let's just put it that way.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I do. Yeah. I've got a lot of beds here and stuff, but yeah, it's very, very true. And we do have a video on soil, by the way, on Jackson Perkins on the Garden Inspired Living on the YouTube channel. It's called, I think, Building a Living Soil Profile that I did about 5 or 6 years ago. Everything, it talks about exactly how to do what you need to do. New bed, established bed. It's in that video.
Awesome. And also, guys, don't forget to reach out to local garden clubs, local resources as well, because I think that's so huge. I follow a lot of, like, I'm here in the Dallas area. I follow a lot of, you know, Texas-based things in terms of like what time that you should be doing things and things for our specific soil. I have absolutely horrifying soil here in my garden, but then out, an hour and a half away out in East Texas where our lake house is. I mean, you can dig it with a teaspoon and it's perfect. I'm just so endlessly jealous of that soil. So it really is so different depending on where you are. So when in doubt, also reach out to your local garden experts.
And that's also why the soil test is so important, Katie Rose, like you talked about. Yes. We talked about, what you talk about locally is so true. And I'll give you an example. You talk about poor soil. So I'm in the upstate of South Carolina. We have the red clay that you can build bricks out of this stuff. And when I got here, the soil was poor. But I did send it off for analysis and found out it was very rich in nutrients, but I had to unlock it with organic material. So when I do new beds, and I've done 3 new beds on our property here, I do them in the fall to get them ready for spring. I use a rototiller, a subsoiler, whatever you can get a hold of. It doesn't matter. Break it up as best you can. Make sure you get the weeds and the grass out. I lay a lot of organic material, 5-6 inches on top of it. I work it into that soil. So now if you take a shovel and you go into my lawn with the red clay, you can't get more than about 1 inch into that soil. Okay. Wow. If you go into my beds, which are now 6 or 7 years old, you can take that exact same hand shovel and you can dig down about 2 feet.
Wow.
That's just by improving the soil. So I got a soil test, got a roadmap. So you can improve poor soil, but get a test, find out what you're doing. But work with your native soil as much as you can.
That is so inspiring. Guys, don't forget, we're going to give away 3 roses at the end of this live. So if you have not done so already, find the link to register to win in the comments. We will be announcing that. Let's see. We have Travel Seco says, yeah, for example, me, I live in Scotland and have a heavy clay soil. I keep adding compost every year, but it's still so dense. First of all, very jealous there in Scotland. It sounds magical.
Yeah. It's quarter soil, bit of heavy clay. Just keep adding the compost, keep adding it, and go to the video, building a living soil profile. I talk about vertical composting with worm castings and an auger on the end of a drill, and that's all I'm going to say. But go to the video and you'll figure it out. Do that, and that's, I think, going to help you a whole lot with your heavy clay soil in Scotland.
Love that. Susan says, what is the safest insect control to use? The Japanese beetles are killing my roses right when they are looking great. Oh, that's the worst, isn't it, Susan?
Yeah, I know. And we talked about beneficial insects and predators. Now, Japanese beetles have no natural predator in our country. So that's a great question, Susan. So here's what I'm going to tell you. There's some new products on the market, and they're based on a thing called BTG. Bacillus thuringiensis gallerii. Yeah, I know. It took me 2 years to learn how to say that.
Right now for saying that.
Thank you very much. That's why I have the hat. But BTG, that's the things you need to keep in mind. They've discovered this is there's various forms of BT, and this one gallerii, they find it particularly attacks Japanese beetles, specifically. Does not hurt beneficial insects or the pollinators or things like that. You can use it as a grub control in your lawn before the beetles emerge. And actually, we did a video on this as well, I believe, on Japanese beetle control. You can look it up. You can use it as a grub control. That's your first line of defense. When the adults hatch, you can use it as a line of defense on the plants themselves. Spray the adult beetles. It does not help harm pollinators. I'll tell you why in a moment. When they go to ground again and become grubs, you can spray it one more time and defense it that way. I heard of this product for the first time 4 years ago. I've used it for 3 years in my own garden on purpose because I didn't want to talk about it unless I know it worked. So the first year I used it, I had much less Japanese beetles. The second year, not many at all. Last year, I had almost none. And I'm in Japanese beetle country. So this BTG really works. It does not harm the beneficial insects, does not harm butterflies or anything along those lines. So look for BTG. Just Google it, BTG product. There's a Bug Juice is one. There's a couple like that. And watch the video on that. And certainly get on my Facebook group and ask questions. But BTG, Natural Japanese Insect Control. One other thing I want to say this, don't use the product. It doesn't work. It does work. I'm not going to say that right here and right now. It kills most anything it comes in contact with. I'm not a big believer in using that product.
Mm-hmm. Such great info. And also, I like to hype your Facebook page. So this feels like a good time since you just mentioned it. But Paul has a Facebook group called Paul Zimmerman. I always get this wrong. Paul Zimmerman Roses and Gardening, right?
Paul Zimmerman Roses Gardening. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So you can join that group, and it's really helpful. Everyone is so kind and informative. People will post their pictures of their roses and say, what do you think this issue is? I actually used Paul's Facebook page or Facebook group to diagnose an issue I'd been having with my own roses last year. So shout out to the Paul Zimmerman
Thank you very
Facebook
much.
group. So definitely everybody go join that group if you haven't done so already. And while
Good.
we're on the subject of my own trials and tribulations, I have a personal question, which is, what are your thoughts on nematodes?
Nematodes. I mean, there's good and bad nematodes. Like if you like,
Specifically
a lot of
for
people use the for.
chili thrips.
I'm sorry, chili thrips.
Specifically for chili thrips.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, absolutely,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, there are a lot of nematodes. I mean, that's what a lot of like the milky spore bacteria and even the BTG. It's nematodes that attack them before they come into the garden, before they actually hatch and become, adults while they're in the soil. Absolutely, it's a great line of defense. Anything Katie Rose, like chili thrips, if you don't want to use the heavy chemicals, there's going to be 2 or 3 lines of defense. You get them while they're in the ground, then you get them while they're on the plant before they become adults and mature and drop back down to the ground. Same with the Japanese beetles. But absolutely, yeah, nematodes. There's a lot of wonderful, wonderful studies coming out about those. Yep, go for it.
Awesome. I think I'm gonna try this spring to really nip this in the bud.
And it may take a couple seasons. Keep that in mind.
Okay, yes. That's good. Yeah. That's good to remember with a lot of things in the garden. I think it's definitely like a long man's game.
It really is. And particularly if you're going to do insect control organically, it takes time. It really does. Yeah. If you've been spraying for insects and spraying for aphids and thrips and the beneficials aren't coming into your garden because there's nothing to eat, it can take a season or 2 of not spraying for them to show up, but they will show up. I can guarantee you that. That's how I deal with insects in my garden.
Traveler Secco says, Paul has enlightened us with very useful tips. I'm a member of that group. He has the best videos on YouTube educating us. So sweet.
Thank you, Traveler Secco. Your check's in the mail.
Linda says, really started adding roses to my garden and love them. The beetles are horrible in June. Was told to pull off all the blooms till they are gone. Does that really help? This is
that's a great question.
Summer pruning, which I think is one of your favorite
we do talk about that. So Linda, what you're saying is the Japanese beetles, they're drawn to your garden by scent. That's how they're drawn into your garden. So they're drawn by the flower. Scent is what they are. What I do in the summertime, for myself at least, since I don't get a lot of bloom, and just where I am, this could be different for different people depending on your climate, I will go ahead and do a summer cleanup, and I will cut the blooms up, cut the roses back a little bit. But again, the BTG product works. Japanese beetle traps, let's talk about those. Don't hang them in your garden. That's going to just bring the Japanese beetles into the garden itself. You actually want to hang them upwind, because what they do is they release a pheromone, which is scent. And what you want to do is, if your garden is here and the wind blows this way coming into your garden, you hang the beetle traps here, try to capture the beetles before they actually come into your garden. I've done that with some success as well. So those are some of the layers you can use. But yes, the answer is removing the flowers will help with the Japanese beetle situation, because it's the fragrance of the flowers that brings them into your garden.
Genius. And I've never had to deal with Japanese beetles, but I do feel like it would be so natural for people. Yes, it would be so knock on wood, Aufkopf, as we say in German.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. But I feel like, that it would be natural for people to want to put that right in the garden. So it's a great
tip. That's what you always have people with the traps. Well, I'll put it in the garden. That's too late. They're already in the garden by then. But try the BTG. Like I said, this is from personal experience. This product is working.
Mm-hmm. C. Morales says that they are in zone 10 and that they got in 1 spray of horticultural oil and copper. Am I able to spray again during the growth season, or must I wait until dormancy?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you're in zone 10, which is warm. You did a dormant spray. Horticultural and copper is a good dormant spray. What dormant spray does, you do that right after you prune, hopefully when there's no leaves on the roses. And the idea is that things like scale or things that might overwinter on your roses, that'll knock that down before the season gets. So again, firing up your roses for spring is what that's about. So Steve, here's my answer to your question. In zone 10, you're probably leafed out. If you do a combination of horticultural oil, which is a spreader sticker, also some other scale, and copper, you're probably going to burn your foliage. Here's what you can do. You can do just a copper only. So if you see a bad outbreak of black spot, for example, powdery mildew, or whatever, copper is a contact eradicant. It will kill the spores on the plant, but it will burn if you do it in the summer, in the heat of the summer. So what you can do, get up in the morning, cloudy day is preferable. Spray your copper at normal growth range, not the dormant strength, the normal season strength, with no spreader sticker, no horticultural oil. Use a hose end sprayer or your regular sprayer, whatever do. Spray to the point of dripping. Give it about 30 minutes and then wash it off. Because what that does is the copper, when it contacts the black spot, powdery mildew, rust spores, etc., on the foliage, it will kill them on contact. You rinse it off, so when the sun comes out, it doesn't burn it. That's in essence what you're doing. It's what's called the Old Bordeaux mixture in the vineyards of France. That's in essence what you're doing.
So much good info. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I did that when I lived in Los Angeles and had my rose care company. That's how we dealt with it a lot, with people who didn't want chemicals. So, you know, it doesn't, and the black spot won't disappear from the foliage, but hopefully you can kill it so it doesn't spread. And if you do get some black spot, watch what I call your canary in a coal mine rose. There's always one rose that gets black spot before all the other roses do. And when it gets it, you know, the spores are present. Go ahead and do a preventative copper spray to knock out the spores back down. Watch it, keep an eye on it. If it doesn't reoccur, you're in good shape. If it does reoccur, a week later, do one more to hope you can get it under control.
Such good stuff. I also really love neem oil for black spot. And again, like Paul said, you don't want to burn your foliage. So here, especially I live in Dallas, it's super, super hot and sunny all summer long. So I always go out like right before dark. And that's when I spray neem oil so it can settle in. And never even occurred to me to actually wash something off after. So that's a great.
Yeah, you can do that with the copper. Yeah, the neem oil you want to go ahead and leave on, but like you said, right before dark, and you know, or even on a cloudy day would be fine. You know, if you have a cloudy day coming. Yeah.
So roses are a labor of love, especially in the first year. What should gardeners realistically expect from their roses in the first initial growing season?
That's a great question, and it is important to manage expectations in that first season. So, you know, what you're hoping for in the first season is for the rose to settle into your garden. You're hoping for a really good root system to get developed. You can't see that, but that's what you're hoping for and what you're pushing for is that root system to go. You know, you're going to want some top growth. You're going to see some flowering. Some people will disbud the flowers to encourage new growth. I want to see the flower, so I'm not big on that. But you can if you want to do that a little bit. You want to see some growth begin. So when you plant it in the spring, expect it to sit a little bit, get the root system going. If you're following the fertilizer program we're talking about, hopefully come late summer, going in the fall, you'll probably see some new growth start to come out. That'll be very, very encouraging to see that. The second year is probably when you're going to see a whole lot of new growth start to spur out of that rose. So, you know, it's a year or two to really settle into your garden. Give it that time. With climbers, it's 3 years. 3 years for a climber to come into its own before it even begins to bloom sometimes. Sleep the first year, develop the root system. Creep the second year, which is put out those long, long canes, which is the structure of the climbing rose. And then leap the third year, which is when it starts to bloom. So the first year, just keep it settled in, you know, light hand with the fertilizer, focus on the growth. And that's going to be your expectations for that first year growth on that new rose.
Flora asks, are herbs compatible with roses? Great question, Flora.
Absolutely. Any plant is compatible with a rose, by the way, except for Physostasia, which is very invasive. Herbs and roses go great together. And here's a little tip. We're not on talking about deer, but we'll talk about it. Deer love to eat roses, as we all know. The deer's main line of defense is its snifter, its sense of smell. That's how it smells predators. If you confuse the sense of smell with overly fragrant plants like herbs, like lavenders, that will confuse deer and it will help deter them from your garden.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Deb says, thanks for all the good information. Love the lives. Deb, thank you for being here. We love doing these. And Buzz says, oh, good info about the climbers. Patience is needed.
It is all the key with climbing roses. It really is 3 years. So thanks for reiterating that, Buzz. It really is important.
Paul, you were just telling us to kind of circle back here, that Oxford Girl, one of your favorite climbers that's now available on jacksonperkins.com is, did you say 20 years old, 25 years old?
It's 20 years old in my garden.
20 years old.
Yeah,
yes,
bred by Mike Athey out of New Zealand. Yeah, Mike Athey breeds on the South Island of New Zealand under brutal conditions. And it's a phenomenal rose. And even up north, it's a great, great rose. Yeah, it's it's that combination of this wonderful heavenly fragrance, beautiful pink blooms with very, very double and very swirly. glossy
Mhm.
foliage. Like I said, I've never seen disease on this thing. I've never seen dieback on this thing, even when I get into the teens. It's just this lovely rose, and it's one been in my garden. And when we started the Around the World collection at Jackson Perkins, I was like, boom,
Mhm.
I want to get this thing into America. It's such a great rose.
That's awesome. And talking about
Yeah.
expectations too, I think it's important to remember that roses are really so long lasting. This is not like planting an annual.
Yes.
You treat a rose well and it will come back and show up for you year after year after year. One of my favorite quotes, I can't remember who says it, oh my goodness, is to plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow. And I think that is so
Yeah.
lovely to really
It's a
plan
great,
it.
great, great quote. Yeah. Yeah. The other one I love that's along those lines is a wise gardener will plant trees they will never sit under.
Ah, that's so sweet.
Yeah. Same old kind of thing. Yeah, it really is. Yeah. I always say, people say, you're gardening on the property. It's like, no, I'm borrowing the property for a while, and then, when we've been on this farm, my wife bought this place in 94. So we've been here a long time. It's a horse farm. We've got acreage. I've got room for, I've got 4 basic garden beds. My beds all together are about 4,500 square feet all told. And, I'm here and people say, well, gosh, what's going to happen when you leave at some point at the farm? I said, well, then the next person will take over, decide what they want to do with it. So I'm just here temporarily building an environment for nature.
And this is my second house. And when I sold my first house, I actually had a much larger yard and more roses, if you can believe it. I just had so much more space. And I was literally sobbing on moving day
Yeah.
about leaving my garden. And my friend said, oh, how could you sell your house? How could you leave that garden? And I said, isn't it wonderful that a plot of the earth is more beautiful because I lived there? I think
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
I totally agree. We're leaving our own impression on it, and that's why I always say, people
Yes.
say, well, gosh, what's the right way to do a garden, the right way to plant a garden, the right way to combine perennials? The right way is your way.
Yes.
Every
Yeah.
garden's personal. It really is. And I was the same way when we left our house. We had a duplex in California with a tiny little garden. I had maybe 30 roses there. And some of them were some of the first roses I bought. And I actually dug a lot of them up, bare rooted, and shipped them across the country.
Oh, I
I
should
could
have
have bought
done.
them again, but that wasn't the same thing.
No, it's
And
not
and,
safe.
and
But,
yeah,
yeah.
that was 30 years ago, and several of them are actually still living in the garden now.
Ah, I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
Flora asks, is there a reference page / site that categorizes roses by scent? That's so interesting.
Whoa, that's a great. I will tell you, David Austin's rose site is probably the one that I would consider the most for scents. He does a lot of work on scent. There's a French rose breeder named Delbard, Delbard. They do a lot of breakdown on fragrance as well. The site's in French, but you can translate it. Those are the two that come to mind that have really dove into the fragrances and the various notes and the various nuances as well.
And Flora, if you want a couple of my favorite rose recommendations that are amazing, if you're into roses for scent, has got to be Earth Angel, Sentimental, and April in Paris. 3 of the best
Yeah,
smelling
I'd
roses
go
I have
along with that.
ever grown. So be sure
Yeah,
to check those out.
yeah,
And
very,
again,
very good
anyone
fragrance.
watching, if you are ordering from Jackson Perkins, you can use my code ROSETABLE15 for 15% off your order.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, Traveler Seco says, "Oh, I'm gonna mess up this."
That's just Lane de Feligonde.
Oh, thank God you got it. Okay,
Just
it's
Lane de Feligonde.
fantastic.
It's an old-fashioned rambler. I can't remember if it's Wicarana or Multiflora. I think it's Wicarana based. Beautiful pale yellow flowers. It's one of the few old ramblers that repeats. Very lax growth. Outstanding ramblers, just Lane de Feligonde, and I think we'll have to add that to the Jackson Perkins Old Garden Rose collection.
Ooh, exciting. I
Thanks
think
for bringing that
ramblers
up.
are really underrated personally. I like the sort of casual nature of them. I think they're cool.
Oh, they're wonderful. Yeah. I mean, I fell in love with the old garden roses. That's how it got me into roses to begin with, particularly the spring flowering ones, the ones that only flower in spring. They're, the old Gallicus centifolius damask and the albas. I mean, they have a charm all their own. And I see Gertrude Jekyll popped up. Yep. For fragrance. Absolutely. Thorns they'll tear you to pieces. But oh my gosh, that fragrance.
Hamza asked a great question. What are the roses that do well in shade? What's a repeat blooming climber? I'm a first-year gardener.
So most climbing roses, modern climbing roses, are going to repeat blooming. So if you go to the Jackson Perkins site, look under climbing roses. Oxford Girl we've been talking about, that's a repeat blooming. Big Ben, the Fox, the rose from John Ford I talked about. So you're going to get mostly repeat flowering then. Roses that do well in shade, to be honest with you, no rose does well in pure shade. They just don't. They're sun-loving perennials. That's
Mhm.
like, putting a hosta in full sun, it's going to die.
Mhm.
If you live further south in a hotter climate, like where you are, Katie Rose, you can get away with some dappled shade or some dappled sun or maybe morning sun. But ideally, don't plant a rose in full shade. It's just not going to be happy.
Yeah, and
Just being
Hamza,
honest.
if you've got tons of shade, I would just go hydrangea and hosta all day
Yeah,
long.
there you
I'm
go.
really jealous that I don't. Every time I come across a hydrangea that says this can take part sun, I thought, oh, maybe I can try this in the shadiest spot in my garden. It really can't. It can't take like Texas dappled
Yeah,
sun. It's still so intense. So I
yeah,
would say lean into your shade and really build up a shade garden.
yeah,
And I love that on Jackson Perkins, it has very nice breakdowns for things like, do you need drought tolerant plants or
yeah.
shade tolerant plants and those types of things. So that'll help you narrow it down. And you can even put in your zone, your zip code for your
Yeah.
zone, get plants that are going to do really well in your garden.
Yeah, I mean, Astilbe is a classic shade plant. Beautiful plumes of flowers that come in a lot of different colors. So, yeah, lean into the fact that you've got shade. Just don't try to force a rose into where it doesn't want to go, and like you don't force
Mhm.
a shade plant into where it doesn't want to go.
Mhm. Susan says, I've been looking for an old fashioned rose called Seven Sisters. Can't find it. Any ideas?
Yeah, Seven Sisters is Rosa multiflora platyphylia. It's a wonderful I think it's a hybrid multiflora rambler. The blooms are probably about 2 inches across. It's got variances of pink and purple and white into it. It's very hard to find. If you want to email me, Susan, Paul at paulzimmermanroses.com, I'll see what I can do. There's a small in the south in particular a rose with small pink flowers called it's actually Dorothy Perkins. A lot of people say that Seven Sisters. It's not. The true Seven Sisters is Rosa multiflora platyphylia. But if you want to email me, occasionally you can come up with it. It is a very, very lovely rose and worth growing. Man, we've got some wonderful, wonderful rose people. I'm getting some
I
wonderful obscure
know.
roses. I'm geeking out here.
I know. I love doing things and talking so in depth about roses because I could do this
Yeah,
all day long. Well, I do think it's time to announce our winners of our
yay!
3 roses from Jackson and Perkins. Hopefully, they're
Wonderful.
still watching. So, our winners are Wanda Jazz, Jeffrey Woods, and Susan Burton. Congratulations, everybody. I do believe we're going to write, yes, here we go. Send a direct message to Jackson and Perkins on Facebook or Instagram to claim your rose. So congratulations to Wanda, Jeffrey, and Susan. And we've had so much fun doing this series. What do you think, Paul? Should we do some more later this year? Maybe check in the
I,
summer?
I think we should. I think we should check in the summer and maybe check into putting your roses to bed. And we
Mhm.
certainly, as we were talking about in the break, we've got a whole bunch of, particularly in the Around the World collection, some wonderful new stuff that we can't
Mhm.
discuss quite yet, but it will be out in 2026. It'd be fun to kind of talk about that a little bit too. And also, I get asked a lot, can I bring in roses from Europe and overseas? We could talk about the fact that what it takes, the process from quarantine and stuff to bring in roses. We can talk about importing stuff. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think summertime will be the next time to touch base.
Awesome. Well, tell people where they can find you.
PaulZimmermanRoses.com. That's my website. There's information on the services I offer, Zion Consulting, garden tours that I lead. So that's the place to go. My videos are there. And where can we find you, Katie Rose?
Yes, therosetable.com. So I just actually dropped a lovely Snow White tea party in the garden. It was very adorable. So if
Yeah.
you guys like a good garden party or just hanging out in the garden, that is my favorite thing to do. So very exciting. And then I have a whole gardening tab where I write about, what's happening in my vegetable garden. I write about all different types of roses and herbs and all sorts of good stuff. So constantly growing and learning. I also love to do what I call Game of Thorns in the spring, where I track all of my roses that bloom.
Great
So
idea.
very excited. I have no idea who's going to win so far. I feel like you, everything just woke up all of a sudden, and it's been very kind of dramatic to see the rose growth in the last week, 10 days, 2 weeks. So pretty exciting. And I'm the Rose Table on all social media. So thank you guys so much for watching, and yeah, happy gardening.
Happy gardening and happy spring. And we'll see you in the summer.
Yes.